Hello guys. So for our module 4 in your subject mobile application development, our topic is regarding MIT App Inventor components and blocks. So first let's start. Components are pieces of application of your application that do actions for you. So components are dragged from the components palette and are placed on the phone or on the phone viewer that we are seeing on our MIT App Inventor designer view. So users can then change properties of these components such as color, font, speed, etc. etc. Okay, so components guys is basically ito yung bumubuo ng inyong applications, no? So when we say pieces of your application, so this could be your buttons, this could be the labels that you're adding on your application, or pwede rin naman ito yung mga images na nilalagay natin on your application, no? So if we'll be seeing yung ating MIT App Inventor. Okay, so this is the user interface that we'll be seeing for your MIT App Inventor, no? It is divided into two parts. So, we have yung tinatawag natin na designer view and your blocks editor. So, on your designer view, so basically, dito po natin makikita yung ating mga components. And later on, yung topic natin regarding built-in blocks, no? So, dito naman natin sila makikita on your blocks editor. So, for now, let's focus muna on the designer view. So, again, no, the components that you can use in MIT App Inventor are placed dito sa left side ng ating user interface or ng ating screen. So, basically, these components are divided into categories, no? So, we have user interface, we have your layout. So, these are the components under layout. We also have media, okay? We have drawing and animation. We have maps, sensors, etc. etc. So, we also have itong extensions, experimental, Lego, Mindstorms, connectivity, and so these are the different um, categories of our uh, components. So, you can basically just use itong uh, search dito in order for us to search a particular component that you want to use, no, para sa inyong mga project. So, this is basically the user interface that we'll be expecting para sa mga components natin. So, pagdating sa mga components, we usually just drag them papunta dito sa ating viewer or papunta dito sa ating mobile phone. Then, as I've mentioned dun sa ating PowerPoint, no, so we have the properties. So, what are these properties? So, properties are basically properties or settings na we can change to modify uh, yung itsura nung inyong component or how it will function. So let's say for example, if it's a button, you can change its background color, yung font style natin, yung size, etc. etc. We can also add the background image para dito sa button na to, no? So mm, ayan, that's a quick overview of what a component is, no? So now let's proceed. So in the designer view, again, no, makikita po natin yan on the left-hand side. Ito yung tinatawag natin na components palette. Okay, so this is your components palette. So this palette contains different drawers such as for the user interface, map sensors, which holds all the components, no? So these are the different categories that we have for your components. So regarding the types, no, there are two main types of components in MIT App Inventor. So that will be the visible and the non-visible component. So first, let's start with uh, the definition of what is a visible component, no? So when we say visible component, this is basically components na once dinrag natin on your web viewer, we will be able to see on the web viewer. So katulad nito sa button na to, no, I already drag a button dito. So as you can see, makikita natin yan on your screen. So this could be an example of your visible component. So ano yung examples niyan, no? So mostly makikita natin yan yung mga components under user interface. Those are visible buttons. Now, how about non-visible components? So when we say non-visible components, simple lang 'yan. So when we drag them papunta dito sa ating viewer or dito sa ating mobile phone, no, we won't be able to see them. Di nyo sila makikita dito sa mismong screen. So let's say for example, maglagay tayo ng ano ba? Let's try to add a media. Okay, so let's say a camera. So as of now, ang nakikita natin dito sa screen na to is we have a button. Okay? So if we'll be dragging out a camera papunta dito, no? So as you can see, there won't be any changes sa ating user interface. Why? It's simply because the camera is an example of a non-visible component, no? So usually non-visible component, ito po yung mga type ng components na hindi natin ginagamit for designing the user interface. This comes or madalas natin ginagamit ito more on providing as functionality. So paano natin malalaman ngayon if those non-visible components are already present in our application? So you can basically see itong ating component list dito. Okay? So dun sa right side ng ating sa right side ng ating components, no, you'll be able to see yung ating components list. So in here, you'll be able to see how many screens yung meron tayo on our current na mobile application and what are the different components under each screens that we add. So for the moment, we'll stick sa one screen muna, no, kasi this will be our topic for the next module. So as you can see, we have the button 1 as part of screen number 1. So, meron tayong isang component dito na button 1. Then, below button 1, makikita nyo ngayon dito si camera 1. Si camera 1. This is the camera that we drag papunta dito sa ating viewer, no? So, even though na hindi po natin sila nakikita on your viewer, you'll be able to see them on the components list. So, para makikita natin, no, is the component that I added is nandun nga ba sa application natin. Okay? So, what are the examples ng ating non-visible components? So, ayan, no, we have accelerator, sound, orientation sensor, etc., etc. So, now, regarding properties, every component is characterized by various components that stores values to define their current state. So you can specify the initial state of a component in the properties pane of the designer window. So saan po natin makikita yung ating mga properties? Again, no, I'll just click back pabalik dito sa button. So this is the properties panel. So dito po natin makikita kung ano yung mga configurations that we can do or we can change dun sa ating mga components, okay? In order for us to modify kung ano yung magiging itsura nila or how they will function. So this is your properties panel. So next, these blocks change the text of the label to say hello world and change the color of the text to purple. So ngayon, no, etong mga to, this is a way kung paano natin pwedeng i-modify yung sabihin na natin na yung ating mga components using blocks. Okay? But we can also do this, no, via the properties. So let's say dito sa user interface, let's do the counterpart nito, no. So we'll be adding a text na hello world and we'll be changing its text color. So paano ba natin gagawin 'yan? So let's say for example, I'll be dragging out a label in here. So this is an example of our label, no. So how do we add yung text na hello world for our label and how do we change its font color na hindi gumagamit ng blocks? Then we will be using yung ating property. So first, no, hanapin natin ngayon dito. Ayan, this is our tawag dito, properties. So under properties, dito sa bandang lower part, no, you'll be able to see yung text na property. Tapos meron siyang text box na text for label 1. So we could add or we could change yung nakikita natin dito na text, no? Ayan, no? So, lakihan lang natin ng konti. You'll be able to change yung text na nakikita natin dito. Depende dun sa gusto nyong ilagay. So, let's say you want to change the label. Ayan. So, I change the label to hello world. So, magpapalit yan ngayon dito. Okay? So, what we're going to do next is we'll be changing its font color naman. So, how do we change its font color? So, let's say, ayan, no? Dito lang po sa bandang baba ng text, we'll be able to see yung text color natin. So, we'll be changing its default. Kapag kinlik natin to, no, there will be a selection of colors that we can use. So, yung kanina, ginamit siya is magenta. Let's just click magenta to change the color of your text. Okay? So, ganyan lang. So, basically, what this says is, we can change the properties of our components using two ways, no? You can change its properties using yung ating properties pane or you can change yung properties na yun using blocks. So, dahil nandito po tayo sa components of the moment, we'll be utilizing the properties. Later, no, we'll be providing examples kung paano natin pwedeng gawin itong mga configurations na to, providing directions and functionalities to these components using the blocks. Okay? So, let's proceed. So, each component have methods, events, and properties. So, most properties can be changed by apps. So, these properties have blocks and you can use to get and set the values. So, ito po yung sinabi natin na example kanina, no? So, let's say if you want to modify the properties of your components, again, we have two ways. You can use the blocks editor o yung mga blocks natin, or we can change the properties via the components properties pane. Okay? So, now, component classification. So, these are the different classifications ng ating, no? Ating mga components. So, ayan po sila. So, we have the user interface, we have the layout components, we have the media components, okay? We also have the drawing and animation components. I believe I already shown you kung example ng ating drawing and animation components on our last discussion. So, I won't be providing an example na for this one, no? So, we also have map components, sensor components, social components, storage components, connectivity components, Lego Mindstorm components, and experimental components. So, we won't be going through lahat ng mga components na to, no, guys, no? So, we'll be just doing an overview sa different components under nitong mga classifications na to kasi medyo marami itong mga to, no? Siguro, we'll be providing 2 to 3 examples of how do we use these components. So, ano ba yung pinakamadalas na magagamit natin dito in creating our mobile application? So, most probably, that will be yung para sa user interface, layout, and media. Let's say, you'll be creating an application that will be having map integration. You can use yung ating mga map components. Social components, storage, storage components most probably, if you want to store your, your data within the, application. So, if you want to store, or let's say, you'll be developing an application that will be storing yung data locally, you can use the storage components. But, hindi ko i-demo sa inyo ito, okay? Ang i-demo ko sa inyo by next week is, si experimental components. So, let's just check. So, under experimental components, meron kasi tayong tinatawag na Firebase dito. So, ito yung i-demo ko sa inyo next week kasi we'll be having, or I'll be providing you an example, no, parang simpleng login registration functionality sa isang mobile application using Firebase wherein yung login credentials ng users nyo will be stored sa isang database online. So, ganun na lang yung gawin natin by next week. So, the demonstration for Firebase, no, I'll be providing that next week. So, ano pa ba? Ayan. So, Lego Mindstorm components. Itong Lego Mindstorm components na to, we won't be able to demo ito. No? I won't be able to demo ito. Kasi I believe itong Lego Mindstorm components na to is a proprietary parang robotic components na you can program using MIT App Inventor. So, we'll be skipping this one. Okay, so let's start. The first, no, category for our components will be yung ating user interface components. So, MIT App Inventor provides a variety of pre-built user interface components such as structured layout and UI components that allows you to build the graphical user interface for your application. Again, no, tulad ng sinabi dito, the user interface component, ito po yung ginagamit natin to create the interface or the graphical user interface of your mobile application. So, ito po yung ginagamit natin to design, okay, yung ating mobile application. Let's say, for example, do we want to add images? Do we want to add buttons dun sa ating mobile application? So, we'll be using user interface components to do that. So, now, here are some of the examples of the different user interface components that we can add on your mobile application. So, most of this, no, you'll be familiar na, guys. So, I won't be I won't be explaining them deep down. So, let's say, for example, button. We're familiar naman dyan eh. So, ayan, we have button. We have a checkbox. Ito, we have a date picker. So, date picker is a button that when clicked, auto-launches a pop-up dialog to allow the user to select a date on the Gregorian calendar. Okay, so let's say for example, if you'll be clicking the date picker, no, it will be popping out a window or a dialog box, no, na makikita nyo wherein the user will be able to set the day, month, and year dun sa date na gusto niyang ilagay. Next, we also have image and labels. So, image, familiar na tayo dyan, no? So, let's say labels. Ano ngayon itong mga labels na to? So, when we say labels, ito yung mga text natin na nilalagay on your user interface. Let's say, for example, we want to add a note sa isang sabihin na natin na registration. So, let's say maglalagay ka ng note, let's say passwords should not contain special characters, okay? So, yung label na yon or yung text na yon, hindi naman clickable yun. And purpose lang nun is basically to display text. So, yun po yung purpose natin for label. So, for us, in order for us to show text within your mobile application. Next, we have list picker. It is a button when clicked displays a list of text for the users to choose among. So let's say for example, saan ba natin makikita itong list picker na to? So most probably, the best example, no, let's say dun sa mga cities or places. Let's say for example, it will be asking you what region, saang region ka nakatira sa Pilipinas, no? Let's say for example, it will be providing NCR, Central Luzon, no? So, instead of the user na magta-type na lang siya doon mano-mano doon sa ating text box, so why not use a list picker wherein predefined na yung mga choices ni user and hindi siya magkakamali doon sa spelling or pagta-type ng kanyang gustong ilagay. We also have list view. Is a component that allows to place a list of text elements on your screen to display. So yung kanina, list picker is papipiliin mo si user kung ano yung gusto niya i-select dun sa list. So for the list view, okay, you'll be providing the whole list to be displayed on the screen. So hindi mo na siya kailangan i-click pa. Okay, so automatically once the application loads, it will be providing you the contents of the list. Okay? Then we also have a notifier. So a notifier is a component that displays alert message and creates Android log entries through an assortment of methods. So ito po yung ginagamit natin in creating notifications. We also have your password text box. So it is a text box component which hides the text that has been typed. So it will be changed to, let's say, a circles, yung each character, or an asterisk. So, next is we have a slider. So, slider is a progress bar that adds a draggable tab as the slider is dragged. So, it will trigger the position change event, reporting the position of the slider tab. So, basically, itong slider na to, no, we can use this to basically provide percentage or as an input do sa mga users natin. We also have spinner. It's a component that displays a dialog with a list of elements. So this is parang katulad lang ito dun sa list natin, no? Or sa list view, no? Once na kinlik natin, it will be providing us a list of elements or list of text or let's say list of images, etc., etc. Then we also have a switch. It is a component that can detect user taps and can change their Boolean state into response. So let's say for example, we mostly use itong mga to for on and off purposes. So let's say for example, do sa settings mo, do you want to turn on yung dark mode or do you want to turn on your Wi-Fi or Bluetooth? So ito po yung ginagamit natin. That's the switch. We also have your text box. So text box is a component that allow users to enter text in a text box component. So this is similar with your password text box. The main difference lang is sa text box natin, it doesn't change yung kung ano man yung dinidisplay dun sa box kahit ano man yung tinatype ni user. So this is ideal for, let's say for example, creating registration forms. Let's say adding yung ating username, okay, providing the full name or the first name or the email, etc., etc. We also have time picker. So it is a button when click on opens a dialog to allow the user to select time. So this is similar with date picker but instead of date, no, ang pinipili natin is time. So this is similar dun sa mga ginagamit for alarm clocks. Okay? So then we have the last one. This is the web viewer. So it is a component for viewing web pages. So ngayon, no, paano ba natin ginagamit yung ating mga user interface na components na yan? So basically katulad nung pinakita natin kanina, no, all you need to do is basically drag them. Okay? Let's say for example, gusto kong gumamit ng button. I'll just drag the button in here. Okay, so kung ayaw mo, you can use the components list, no? Select mo lang yung components na gusto mong alisin. So, let's just delete this one. Okay. So, let's say for example, create tayo ng parang Let's add, sabihin na natin na a text box. Okay, so asan ba yung text box natin? So let's say this one. Let's add a text box, then password text box. Okay, then sabihin na natin na we'll be providing 2 buttons. Okay, so yan po yung magiging itsura ng ating user interface. Now, so ang gawin natin is let's just preview this dito sa aking mobile phone. So let's try to connect it um, via USB kasi naka-USB tayo. Okay, so ayan. Let's just wait, no? So for us to see yung magiging preview nung itsura ng application natin na to. So later we'll be creating modifications dito, no? Depende dun sa gusto natin gawin kasi the next tawag dito, the next category that we'll be discussing is regarding layout. So basically, how do we lay out ba itong mga to? Okay. Ayan, no? So this is what we'll be expecting dun sa ating dun sa ating mobile application. Ayan, pinipindot ko yung dalawang buttons. Okay, so for your text box, no? So, ayan, we can type in your text, yung usual text natin. Then, dito, if we'll be typing anything, so, lilitaw lang yung first letter for, let's say, at least a second. Then, papalitan niya rin yun into a circle or a dot. Okay, then you have your button. Ayan yung button, no? So, ayan. So, you can basically design the user interface dito, no? So, halimbawa, you want to change the background color. So, pwede natin palitan yung background color dito. Let's say for example, ano ba, background color, let's change it to blue. Yan, pwede natin palitan yan. Makikita naman natin yan on your mobile application. So, basically, no, using the combination of the user interface and its properties, we can modify or we can change the overall look or the user interface na makikita natin para dito sa ating mobile application. Let's say you can also use itong color picker na to change the color that you want to use, no? So, let's say this one, ayan yung kulay, no? So, mostly, no, baka magkaroon kayo ng konting changes dun sa color na makikita. It's because of the mobile phone na ginagamit. Okay. So, basically that's it, no? So, ganyan lang naman kadali yung ating sa user interface eh. All we need to do is basically i-drag natin, ayan. I-drag lang natin papunta dito, then pwede na natin siyang gamitin. Okay? But as of the moment, katulad ng binanggit natin kanina, no, this is not yet functional kasi wala pa tayong mga blocks, no. We still did not add yung blocks natin to provide the direction and provide the functionality na itong mga components na to. As of the moment, again, no, tulad ng sinabi natin kanina, we're just creating the user interface. Okay? Now, in terms of designing the user interface, no, I would suggest na instead of following yung nakikita nyo dito sa viewer, I would suggest na dito nyo na lang tingnan sa mobile phone nyo mismo kasi mas accurate po yung makikita natin dito on your mobile phone. Okay? So, at least nakakapag-live test kayo, no? You're already testing it on your mobile phone. So, you can expect na itong particular na line ng mobile phone na to will have the same look pagdating sa user interface natin. So, now let's proceed dun sa next part natin after the user interface components. So, we have the layout components. So, the layout components defines the structure for a user interface in your application. Now, as you can see dun sa pagdadrag ko kanina nung mga components na to, every time na dinadrag ko sila, nag-i-stack lang sila. Okay? Pababa lang ng pababa. How do you change that arrangement, no? So, paano kung halimbawa itong text na to gusto ko mapunta dito sa right side? So, anong gagawin ko ngayon? So, dito ngayon papasok itong mga layout components natin. So, layout components, again, no, defines the structure for a user interface in your application. So, in here, it will be providing you the different arrangement that you can do para sa inyong mga components within a mobile application. Okay, so let's say, for example, horizontal arrangement. So, component is arranged to display a group of components laid out from left to right. Okay, kapag horizontal, yung components natin are displayed from left to right. Okay, now we also have the horizontal scroll arrangement. So, components, a component formatting element in which it places the components that should be displayed from left to right. Okay, Ano pinagkaiba nila? The main difference lang nitong dalawa na to is yung second one is scrollable. So let's say for example, you want your mobile application para mag-scroll from left to right or right to left, you'll be using yung ating horizontal scroll arrangement, no? Then we also have your table arrangement. So component is used to display a group of components in a tabular fashion. So basically, pwede natin silang i-display na parang naka-table sila. Okay? Then we also have the vertical arrangement and also the vertical scroll arrangement. So yung kung kanina, we have displaying components from left to right, ito naman is from top to bottom. Okay? Kapag naka-vertical arrangement component tayo, no, it's always left aligned. Okay? So pwede naman natin i-change yan or i-modify natin yan later. Yung naka-left align ba yan or naka-center align or naka-right align using the properties. Next, again, so we have yung vertical version naman ng vertical arrangement, no? So, ang main difference lang ito is magiging scrollable yung ating layout. So, now, let's proceed dun sa pagde-design ng ating user interface. Ayan, so, ang gagawin ko muna is, again, no, let's just delete yung mga components na to para let's say we could provide a, maiba ng konti yung pagkakastack ng ating mga components. Let's say for example, let's proceed with the layout, no? So gawin natin, let's say for example lang naman sample na layout natin. Gusto natin yung isang text box na nasa left side, yung isang text box nasa right side. Instead na yung nasa taas yung text box, then merong isa sa baba. Okay, so ang gagawin natin ngayon is we'll be using si horizontal. So ito-drag natin yan ngayon dito. Ayan ngayon, ito si horizontal ngayon, horizontal arrangement. Ngayon, as you can see, dito sa preview ng mobile application nyo, hindi nyo naman makikita itong box na to. Okay lang yan. So, katulad lang ito nung nandito sa canvas. Okay, kapag dinrag nyo yung canvas, merong box, pero hindi naman lilitaw eh. It just define the space na sakop ni horizontal arrangement. Okay, so let's say for examples, try na natin maglagay ngayon ng sabihin na natin na saan na ba yun? Text box. I-drag natin yan papunta dito. Makikita nyo guys, no, meron siyang color blue na line doon. So basically, ang ibig sabihin nun, saan ba mapupunta itong text box ko? Mapupunta ba siya doon sa taas ng horizontal layout? Mapupunta ba siya sa baba ng horizontal layout? O pupunta siya doon sa mismo horizontal layout? So ayan siya ngayon. Okay, so lalabas yung text nyo. Now, add natin yung pangalawa nating text box. So, ayan, nakikita naman natin, magkakaroon tayo ng preview. So, let's say, i-drag natin papunta dito. Ayan siya. Makikita nyo ngayon, lalabas na yung text box 1 natin, and yung ating text box 2. Yun nga lang po, hindi nakagitna. Pero, as you can see, dito sa mobile application natin, parang nakagitna naman. So, ano yung pwede natin gawin? So, you can proceed dito sa horizontal arrangement natin, no? Ayan, no? Tapos, meron tayong ilang properties dito for the alignment. So, let's say, align vertical, you have the choice na 1 is the left, 2 is the right. Okay, tapos, pwede rin sa center. So, ayan, kung naka-top align, top center, ayan siya. Okay, so let's say, for example, ito, ang gawin natin is, yung width niya, i-fill parent natin. Okay, ayan. So, ngayon, if i-fill parent niya yan, susundan niya na ngayon yung naka-center. Okay, so ayan siya. Yung sa vertical align natin, kahit ano yung palitan natin dyan, hindi naman magbabago yan kasi naka-automatic pa yung ating height. So, for the moment, ganyan muna yung gawin natin, no? Okay, so what if now ang gusto naman natin gawin is you already have your text box. So, ang gusto naman natin gawin is maglagay ng buttons na magka-stack. Isang button sa baba, isang button sa taas, and isang button sa baba. Okay, so ang pwede nyo gawin is pwedeng i-drag nyo na lang yung button na yan kasi nga by default, naka-vertical arrangement tayo. But what I would suggest is syempre, instead of using yung naka-default, we just provide the layout para mas madali natin silang ma-configure. So, I'll be adding yung aking vertical arrangement, no? Okay, so kung gagawin ko ngayon is let's try to add 2 buttons. So, kapag in-add natin yung dalawang button na yan, ayan na ngayon yung button. So, paano natin igigitna yan? So, let's try to use the vertical arrangement components. Okay, so let's say ang width natin, palitan natin, let's use yung fill parent. Kapag fill parent, susundan niya yung size ng screen natin for this example. Okay. So, click OK, tapos i-arrange natin. Ayan. So, we can arrange na ngayon yung ating yung mga components depende do sa gusto natin mangyari, no? So, nasa sa atin naman yan kung paano natin siya gagawin. So, let's try to create an experiment, no? So, try natin mag-insert ng image. So, ang layout na ilalagay natin ngayon dito is let's try to add a horizontal arrangement dito sa loob. Ayan. Okay. So, ngayon, if we'll be adding components dito sa loob, susundan niya ngayon yung horizontal. So, ano ba? So, sabihin na natin maglagay tayo ng um, lagay tayo ng switch. Switch natin sa loob. Lagay tayo ng switch dito sa loob. Ayan. So, makikita nyo guys, no? So, we have itong klaseng arrangement na to. So, yung isa, yung parent natin for these 4 components, naka-vertical arrangement tayo. So, you can see, ayan siya. Tapos, meron siyang isang child component dito sa loob. Ayan. So, this is basically the purpose ng ating no ating mga components. We'll be able to manipulate kung saan po natin gustong mapunta yung ating mga tawag dito, yung ating mga components, no? So, in terms of designing the user interface, syempre, I would suggest na we provide yung ating we provide our layouts para mas madali po yung magiging trabaho natin. Okay, so let's say for example, itong parent na to, okay, so we can modify, pwede natin igalaw ng buo ito. Halimbawa, palitan natin yung height natin, gawin natin fill parent. Okay, tapos yung line vertical, lagay natin sa center, lahat yan. Yung 1, yung button 1, button 2, yung switch 1 and switch 2, automatic sasama yan. Okay, kasi nakaisang parent tayo for the layout. What I suggest is, yung hindi ko nagawa dito, is gumawa kayo ng isang pinaka-parent. So, let's say if you want to move yung yung kabuuan ng user interface nyo. But, if let's say for example, gusto nyo lang kontrolin itong certain group, mag-create na lang kayo ng isang layout na that will serve as parent para dun sa mga components na yon. Okay? So, basically, that's the purpose nung nung ating layouts, no? So, ayan, so yung iba't ibang klaseng layouts natin. Again, no, in designing your mobile application, I would suggest na we use itong mga horizontal arrangement na to and vertical arrangement na to. Okay? Next, we have our media components. So, media components, no? So, these are basically components na ginagamit natin for creating or displaying components or media components in our mobile application. So, as you can see, no, we have your camcorder. So, ito po yung ginagamit natin to call yung ating yung ating camera for video recording. So, yung regular naman natin na camera, yung camera that you'll be using for, let's say, capturing an image, that will be your camera. Okay, si image picker naman ngayon, this is yung inyong, let's say, yung parang your photos or galleries. So, i-display niya yung mga photos na meron ka within that mobile application or within your mobile phone, no? Tapos, yun yung yun yung tawag dito, yun yung i-display niya. So, i-display niya ngayon lahat ng mga images na meron doon. Then, we have a player. It is a component that plays your audio. Okay? And controls the phone vibration. So, let's say for example, gusto mong mag-play ng mag-play ng music. So, let's say for example, gagawa ka ng isang mobile application na parang text to speech. So, kung magte-text to speech ka, kailangan mo ngayon mag-provide ng player or mag-create ng player para i-play niya, no? Then, we also have your sound. Ayan, place sound file. Okay, so, ayan. So, we also have your sound recorder. So, familiar naman tayo dyan. Speech recognizer. So, ito naman yung gagamitin na component that listens to user speak and convert it to spoken sound into text. No? Then, we also have yung text to speech. Then, you also have your video player. your Yandex Translate. So it is used to translate words and sentences between different language. Yun nga lang po, itong component na to will require internet access. Okay, kasi yung API niya, okay, nasa internet. So basically, i-drag lang natin yan papunta dun sa ano. Pero again, no, kailangan po natin ng internet connectivity para magamit yon. So, ang gawin natin ngayon is let's try to create an example para dito sa ating mga media components, no? So, let's say for example, uh, asan na yung ayan, ating mobile phone. So, ang gagawin ko is delete ko lang muna to. Okay, let's just delete, no? Um, let's say for example, maglagay tayo ng vertical arrangement. I'll be using fill parent. Then, fill parent. Ngayon, ang ilalagay ko lang dito is a simple button. Okay, so, ayan yung button natin. Lagay natin sa gitna yung ating button. Okay. So, ayan no. Let's say, ito yung button natin ngayon. Palitan natin ng label na click to open camera. Okay, so ayan yung text natin. Ngayon, ang next na gagawin ko is under ng media. So, try natin maglagay ng camera. Okay. Ngayon, katulad ng binanggit natin kanina, guys, no? Camera is an example of a non-visible component. So, as you can see, hindi po natin makikita yung preview ng ating camera on our screen. So, ngayon, ang gagawin po natin, it's instead of just focusing dun sa sa components, we'll be inserting tawag dito, some blocks, no? But again, babalikan ko rin naman itong blocks na to. We'll be discussing yung blocks later after nito mga components na to. So, let's proceed to blocks. Okay, so ngayon, I'll just click button 1. So, these are the different blocks that we can use, okay, kay button. So, eto ngayon si button. So, ang gagawin natin is when button 1 is click. So, ang gusto kong mangyari for my mobile application is kapag kinlik ko yung button, it will be opening up the camera. So at least para ma-demo natin paano umaandar yung media components natin, paano i-call yung camera. Okay? So ayan. This is now yung when button 1 click, no? Then ang gagawin natin ngayon, sabi niya dito, when button 1 is click, so basically this is like a conditional statement, no? If the button is click, do. Ano ngayon yung do? You'll be executing something. So dito natin ipapasok ngayon si camera. Okay? So, proceed tayo ngayon dito kay camera. If you click camera, no, makikita natin yan ngayon ito. So, let's say we have 3 blocks na pwedeng gamitin ngayon kay camera. So, when camera, after picture image, do, tapos call camera 1, take picture, then just call camera. So, gagawin natin ito, call camera 1, take picture. So, ang mangyayari na what we'll be expecting dun sa mobile app na gagawin natin, no, is kapag kinlik daw natin si button 1, i-open niya ngayon si camera. Okay? So, subukan natin yan ngayon. So, ito yung aking mobile phone. Okay? So, click to open camera. Ayan. So, makikita nyo, dun sa phone natin, lalabas yung tawag dito, yung permissions. So, allow lang muna natin. Okay? For the moment. Tapos, i-open up niya na ngayon yung inyong camera. Okay? So, again, no, ibaback ko. Tayo lang natin, naglalag ng konti. Ayan. So, again, no, ito yung mobile application natin. Wala tayong ibang programming na ginawa. Wala tayong parang mga API na nilagay to call the camera, no? We're just using the blocks. So, kapag kinlik natin ngayon itong button na to, ayan, medyo delay lang ng konti, it will be opening up yung camera. So, this will be an example of your, tawag dito, media components. Okay? So, i-back natin ngayon. So, mag-try tayo ng isa pa. Okay? Instead of a camera, ano pa ba yung pwede nating ilagay? Saglit. I'll just check kung ano yung pwede nating i-display. Okay? Okay, so let's say for example, ito yung phone ko, no? I'll just try to capture an image para meron tayo pwedeng ipakitang image. Ayan, so let's just capture an image. Ayan, no? I've captured an image. Tapos, dito, aside kay camera, try natin gamitin si image picker. Drag natin si image picker dito. Tapos, balik tayo kay blocks. So, instead na ito, try natin si image picker. Okay? Let's say ito, call image picker 1 to open. So, halimbawa yan. Okay? Tapos, i-refresh natin yung ating companion app. Check nga natin. Let's just reset the connection. Nawala yung connection ko. Okay? I'll be connecting it again via the cable. Check natin kung may makukoll nyo yung yung gallery ng phone ko. Let's just wait. Okay. So, ito ngayon, no? So, check nga natin. Ano bang meron doon sa designer view ko? Meron na akong, okay. This is for the image picker. So, let's say, click natin yung, ayan. Remember my choice. Say, gallery. Ayan siya. Makikita nyo na this is yung, ayan. Wala pa tayong photo viewer. Ang nilagay lang natin is yung image picker. So, ayan no guys, no? This is basically an example of your media components. So, we have different types of media components in here, no? So, later kapag nandito na tayo sa sensors, no, let's try to provide a combination of sensors and itong media na to later. So, for the moment, burahin ko lang muna tong mga to. So, I could proceed dun sa susunod. Okay. And click lang natin yung blocks. Wala na. Okay. So, now, let's proceed, no? So, after nung ating mga media components, we have drawing and animation. So, for this category, hindi ko na ito demo sa inyo, guys, no? Kasi already na-demo ko na ito sa inyo noong nakaraan, yung sa bounce ball. Okay? So, now, let's proceed. Now, next is we have the map components. So, map components are components used to create maps and the contents na makikita natin dun sa map, no? So, here are some of the, components under map. So, we have circle, we have feature collection, line string, map, marker, navigation, polygon, rectangles. Okay. So, circle is a component visualizes a circle of a given radius centered at a latitude and longitude. So, itong latitude and longitude na to, guys, no, ito yung ginagamit natin na system in order for us to locate yung location dun sa ating globe or within the map. Okay? So, these are numerical values that corresponds to a location within the map. Then, ngayon, let's say itong latitude and longitude na to, let's say nakamark yan into a single place. Let's say an area of a circumference of, let's say, or a radius of 5 kilometers. Ang ibig sabihin nun is within that point, yung 5 kilometers paikot, no? So, yung area na yon. So, usually, to highlight that area, gumagamit tayo ng circle. Now, we also have feature collection. So, groups of one or more map features together. Any events that occur on a feature in the collection will also trigger the corresponding event in the collection component. So, let's say, for example, within a circle, meron kang tinatawag na marker. So, itong marker na to are markers on the map that indicates a special location within the map, no? So, yung circle, yung line string, and yung mga markers na yon, if they're collected into a single location within the map, so ang tawag natin doon is feature collection. Now, we also have line strings. It is a component for drawing an open continuous sequence of lines on a map. So, to add new points of line of string in the designer, drag the midpoint to any segment away from the line to introduce new vertex. Let's say, for example, no, you want to highlight a particular, sabihin na natin, isang lupain. You want to check kung ano yung saan lang yung lupain mo, no? You can follow yung coverage ng lupain mo na yon by creating a line string. So basically para kang nagki-create ng lines that covers a location within the map. We also have your map. So, ayan. It is a two-dimensional container that render map titles in the background and allows for multiple markers and elements to identify points in the map. Then we also have your marker. So again, no, indicator po ito dun sa map natin for a particular location. Let's say, meron kang marker for a business establishment, no? Meron kang marker for government offices, etc., etc. Next, we have navigation. So, navigation components generates direction between two locations using a service open route or open route service. Itong open route service na to, no, it will be requiring yung ating internet connectivity para magamit natin yan. There is also an alternative for our navigation, yung ginagamit naman ni Google, yung si Routes. So, merong sariling service si Google, no? Ang built-in ni MIT App Inventor is si Open Routes service. Okay. Then ito, polygon encloses an arbitrary two-dimensional area on the map. Polygons can be used to drawing a perimeter. Ayan, such as a campus, city, or country. So, ang gawin natin is, let's try to create a simple example ng ating maps, no? Let's say, let's create a simple map na merong marker. Ayan, gawa lang tayo ng isang simpleng map. Let's proceed with maps. So, ito yung mga yan. So, let's drag a map ngayon. Ito yung map natin. So, i-connect muna natin siya via the USB para nakikita natin yung preview dito sa aking mobile phone, no? Okay, so ayan. So, this is our map now. So, ang gawin natin siguro, let's create a simple modification. Let's select yung fill parent para mas madali nating nakikita yung ating map. As you can see, dito sa map po na to, ang location na naka-indicate dito is nasa US ata. So, ayan, it's in Boston. Again, no, kasi si MIT App Inventor or si MIT, Massachusetts Institute of Technology is nasa Boston. So, yan yung ginawa nilang default. Now, let's say gusto natin palitan yung location na nakikita natin dito. We can do that by modifying yung ating center of string. Center from string. So, eto ngayon yung tinatawag natin na longitude and latitude. So, ang pwede natin gawin is, let's say, palitan natin ito, no? Para mapalitan itong location na nakikita natin within this map. So, let's say, for example, we'll be changing it to Mabalacat City, latitude. Yan, lalabas naman yung okay, so let's check this one. Okay, ayan, no? So, Mabalacat City. So, makikita nyo dito, ito yung latitude and longitude niya. So, check lang natin, no? Ayan, ito ngayon yung ikakopy natin papunta dito. Okay? So, let's say for example, first natin i-copy yung ating latitude. Okay, paste natin dito. Then, I'll be copying this one. Okay, makikita nyo, magbabago na yan, no? Then, paste natin yan dito. Okay. So, check natin. Hintayin natin mag-load. Ayan siya. As you can see, no? Etong longitude and latitude natin na ngayon, itong center from string, it will be defining kung ano ngayon yung default na place kung saan niya i-load, no? So, yan ngayon yung sa longitude and latitude natin. Okay? So, halimbawa, yung map type natin, meron tayong roads. Check natin dito sa other properties, no? Yung map type, check natin. Gawin nating aerial. Tingnan natin kung makikita natin siya. Let's wait for it to load or kung mailo-load niya ba or meron ba siyang mailo-load. Check nga natin, terrain. Aerial. Meron ba sa aerial? Okay. I believe hindi niya ma-fetch yung So, or matagal lang siya mag-load pero para makapag-proceed na tayo, let's stick with roads, no? So, ngayon, gagawin natin is next we'll be providing a marker. So, ito naman kasi usually na makikita natin on our maps, no? You can see the map, then it will have markers. So, ang gagawin natin is let's try to mark a particular sabihin na natin na location. So sabihin na natin, hanapin natin yung MCC, nasaan ang MCC. Okay, so I believe this is MCC. Ayan, so we have Mabalacat City College. Now, for our mobile application, no, ang pwede natin gawin, halimbawa, ito, nakamark na dito sa mobile phone, nakaload na siya dito, no, we'll be creating a marker. So, let's say, for example, ayan, hanapin ko yan dito ngayon. Saan na, ayan. Okay, so ito siya ngayon, no. Ang gagawin natin ngayon is we'll be placing down a marker dito. Ayan siya. So, magre-reload ngayon itong map na to. Makikita nyo, ito yung marker na tinatawag natin. Okay? So, ngayon, dito sa properties na to, ayan, pwede na natin palitan yung yung ilan doon sa mga properties ng markers na. Halimbawa, yung kulay, pwede mong palitan. Let's say, gawin natin green. I-reload niya ngayon yung green na yan. Okay? So, ano pa ba yung pwede natin palitan dyan? Ayan, no? So, pagka-drag ko ngayon ng marker na yon, it will be automatically providing the longitude, the latitude and longitude of that location. So let's say for example, maglagay tayo ng description. Sabihin namin na MCC. Okay? So, ngayon, check natin. Ayan, so we already provided the description para dun sa ating para dun sa ating marker. Okay? Ayan. So, this is our marker now. So, ano pa ba yung pwede natin palitan dito? Ayan. You can also change the asset instead na ito yung itong symbol na to yung gagamitin nyo. You can also change its image. Just lagay nga natin title MCC. Ayan. Now, so this is an example of your of your map and markers. Now, if you want to if you want to create multiple markers, pwede naman po 'yan, nasa sa inyo naman. Okay? So, let's proceed next. For our next components, no? So we have sensors. So we have accelerometer sensor. It is a non-visible component that can detect shaking and measure acceleration approximately in 3 dimension using itong measurement na to. Okay, hindi ko lang alam kung ano ibig sabihin ng measurement na yan. Then we also have your barcode scanner. So barcode scanner, we will be using this one, no, to read yung mga barcode or QR codes natin, kung ano yung mga values that are stored dun sa mga codes na yon. So we also have barometer component that can be measured to the ambient air pressure if supported by the hardware. If you can simply assume na yung mga phone natin walang ganyan, but let's say for example you're creating an IoT device, no, so let's say pwede yan. You have your clock, gyroscope sensor, a component providing data of the device gyroscope sensor or yung kanyang 3D orientation. Hygrometer, physical world component that can measure the relative ambient or ambient air humidity if supported by the hardware. Light sensor is a physical world component that can measure the light levels. Location sensor is a non-visible component providing location information including longitude, latitude, altitude, speed, and address. So you can simply sabihin natin, no, if you want to use the GPS of your mobile phone, you'll be able to use itong location sensor na to. You also have your magnetic field sensor, is a component used to monitor magnetic field activity. Near field is a non-visible component that provides NFC capabilities. Ayan, pwede ito sa mga NFC-enabled phones. Orientation sensor is a component that determines the phone's spatial orientation, whether it's in landscape or in portrait. We also have yung pedometer, is a component that keeps count of our steps using the accelerometer. We also have your proximity, is a sensor component that can measure the proximity of an object relative to the view of the screen device. So, ibig sabihin lang nun, it's a sensor or it's a component that measures the distance between a particular object relative dun sa screen ng inyong mobile device. Then, ayan, thermometer. So, familiar naman tayo dyan, no? So, ang gawin natin is let's try to create a simple example gamit yung isang sensor pagdating dito sa ating tawag dito example, no. So, yung sensor na gagamitin natin, syempre, yung built-in na meron dun sa aking mobile phone. So, ano ngayon yung sensor, ayun, nabanggit ko na. Ano ngayon yung sensor na gagamitin natin na yun? So, that will be your accelerometer. So, ang gagawin ko is, I'll be first, no? I'll be just creating a text box. Ayan, so, um, igitna na lang natin para, sige. Just create a layout. Create muna natin yung layout natin, vertical. Nasaan yung vertical? Vertical arrangement. Tapos, ang width, fill parent. Okay, then, I'll be adding a text box. So, lakihan lang natin ng konti lakihan ko lang ng konti yung text box natin. Font size 20 or font size 24. For the height, I'll be using at least 30%. For the width, I'll be using fill parent. Pero parang medyo malaki ng konti. Okay, so ang next na gagawin ko ngayon is I'll be adding the sensor. Okay, so ang sensor na ilalagay ko is yung accelerometer. I'll be shaking the phone later, no? Tapos, ano pa ba? Let's try to... Ayan, I'll be adding a text-to-speech. Let's say, let's add a text-to-speech, no? So, ang gagawin natin ngayon is let's try to create a simple mobile application na wherein magta-type ako ng text dito. Tapos, kung ano man yung tinype ko ng text doon, once I shake the phone, i-convert niya text-to-speech. So, yung text na in-input ngayon from the text box is i-convert niya ng to speech using yung trigger natin na ano na yung accelerometer sensor. So, ang gagawin natin ngayon, I'll be proceeding dito sa blocks, no? So, I'll be selecting accelerometer. So, dito, ayan, we have two conditional statements. So, pwede acceleration change or shaking. So, I'll be using shaking. So, kapag shake ko yung phone later, so, yun yung gagawin niya. Ayan, tapos, ang next natin na gagawin ngayon, sabi niya, when accelerometer is shaking, or your conditional statement, do what? Anong gagawin niya? So, ang gagawin niya is, kukunin niya yung text sa loob ng text box, tapos i-convert niya yung text to speech. So, select natin si text to speech ngayon. Okay, tapos ito, gagamitin natin ito. Call text to speech 1, okay, that speak, tapos ano yung message. So, yun yung kukunin natin. So, ida-drag natin yan ngayon ito dito. Ang problema, ano yung message? Kukunin natin yan from your text box. So, hanapin natin ngayon dito saan si text box, no? Eto. Let's call si text box 1. Then, drag natin. Pwede ba? Ayaw niya. So, I will be using a different one. So, saan na ba yun? Text to speech text. Nasaan na yun? Text to speech. Hindi. No. Wag si text to speech, no. Kukunin pala natin siya kay text box. Sorry. Text box. Eto. Let's try this one. Okay. So, check natin yung logic natin, no? Let's say, if the conditional statement is when accelerometer sensor 1 is shaking, i-call niya ngayon text to speech, then yung message na gagamitin niya is yung text na nakalagay kay text box 1. Okay. So, let's try it muna. I'll be sabihin na natin hello world. Let's shake. Ayun. I don't know guys kung maririnig nyo to, no? Kasi I'm just using ito mic ng phone ko. I'll be just maximizing yung aking volume. Ayan.
Hello world. Hello world EQ. Hello World EQ.
Ayan, may Q. Alisin natin. Ayan.
Hello World. Hello World. Hello World.
Ayan.
Hello
I
World.
don't know if you can hear it through
Hello
my
World.
mic.
Hello World. Hello World.
Ayan siya. So, while I'm shaking ang mobile application, no, maririnig nyo, hopefully narinig nyo yung text-to-speech niya. So, yung API na ginagamit niya, syempre, most probably, English language lang. Try natin maglagay ng Tagalog. Uh,
Sinonganemo. Sinonganemo.
ayan.
Sinonganemo.
Okay. So,
Sinonganemo.
this is now an example of your, an example of your mobile application wherein we're integrating different components, no? So, for this particular example, ito pala yung mobile application. So, as you can see for this particular example, tawag dito, we created a simple mobile application that utilizes different type of components under different types of categories. So, as you can see, text-to-speech is from the media, yung text box natin is from the user interface, then yung accelerometer natin will be from the sensors. Okay? So, let's proceed, no? After yung sensors natin, we have your social components. So social components are components that enable communication using different platforms. So you have your contact picker is a button when dialed displays a displays a list of the contacts to choose among. So email picker, a text box that shows a drop-down menu of choices of email address of a contact that completes the entry. So we have phone call is a non-visible component that makes a phone call to the number specified. Okay, so uh, phone number picker is a button that when clicked displays a list of contacts of the contact phone numbers to choose among. Sharing is a non-visible component that enables file sharing and messages between your app and other apps installed within the device. Texting is a component that launches the device preferred texting app to text message specified in the send message properties to the number specified in the phone number property. We also have Twitter is a non-visible component that enables communication with Twitter. Okay? So, itong mga susunod na to, no, guys, no, I'll just go through some of them. So, we'll be providing itong some of the examples nitong mga social component na to dun sa next two modules natin. Kasi dun sa next two modules natin, will be more on hands-on developing a simple application. Okay? So, again, no, we have storage components. So, ito po yung mga components natin that allow storage for mobile application. Most of the time, itong mga ano na to, itong madalas na mga components na to, no, stores yung data within the mobile device. Okay? So, meron tayong ibang way, okay? But, ito, let's say ito, CloudDB, TinyWebDB, and pwede online yan, no? Pero, I would suggest na we'll be using yung Firebase kasi mas madali ma-setup yung Firebase. Then, you can also use yung Firebase dun sa ibang applications maliban lang dito sa mobile. So, let's start with the storage components, no? So, CloudDB is a non-visible component that allows you to store data on the internet connected to a database server. Ngayon, you need to set up, syempre, kailangan mo ng database server dito wherein saan papasok yung data mo. So, you can host it locally within your, tawag dito, within your computer or within a actual web server. Then, we also have a file is a non-visible component for storing and retrieving files. So, use this component to write or read files on the device. So, ito yung local within your device. Then, we also have TinyDB is a non-visible component that stores data for an app. So, the data stored in a TinyDB will be available each time the app is run. So, ayan siya ngayon. Then, we also have yung TinyWebDB. It is a component that communicates within a web service to store and retrieve information. So, halos kapareho lang itong mga to, no? You'll be retrieving your data from a web service. So, yun nga lang po, no? You need to set up ngayon itong mga to. Okay? So, ito yung Firebase DB na to, no? Madali lang yung configuration. We'll be just creating, tawag dito, a database online. So, free lang naman ito. Tapos, kukunin lang natin yung key na gagamitin. Then, pwede na tayo mag-send and retrieve ng data online for free. No, wala na tayong kailangan i-set up na server. Basically, para mag-create ka lang ng simpleng database online, copying its key. Tapos, yun na. You can already use it on your mobile application. So, ito, we also have yung connectivity components natin, no? So, connectivity components provide means to connect application to other applications or devices to devices. So, let's say activity starter, component that can launch an activity. Okay? Starting a camera application using an start activity method. So, ito yung mano-mano na way, no? Instead of just create, or just basically just calling the camera katulad ng ginawa natin kanina, no? We can set it to a start activity method. So, possible na walang triggers. Let's say, ano ba yung mga options natin na walang triggers, no? Or walang button na kiniklik. So, pwede natin gawin yun ito sa activity starter. So, pwede mag-call na lang tayo, okay, using a method to start up a function or a sensor. Yan, pwede yan. Bluetooth clients is a component used to connect your device to other devices using Bluetooth. Then you have Bluetooth server. It's a component to turn your device into a server that receives connection from other apps to use the Bluetooth client component. Then we also have web. It's a non-visible component that provides function for HTTP, get, post, put, and delete request. Okay? So those are the different components na meron tayo, no? So some of the components na I've shown you kanina, hindi ko na isinama dito, particularly the Mindstorm, no? Kasi we won't be able to demonstrate naman yung sa Mindstorm kasi again, no, these are different types of sensors. Let's say eto, AV3 motor. So wala naman tayong mga gagamitin na physical devices dito for the demonstration of this. Okay, so those are the different components na meron tayo for MIT App Inventor, guys. Okay, guys. So for the next part of our topic is regarding built-in blocks. So what are built-in blocks? So built-in blocks are available regardless of which components are you are in the project. So in addition to these language blocks, each component in your project has its own set of blocks specific to its own element or its own events, methods, and properties. No, as we've provided an example earlier, no? So, ang tawag po natin dito sa mga to will be blocks. So, these are the different blocks that we're using, okay, to create the direction or to create the functionality of the mobile applications that we'll be doing. Now, yung mga dinemonstrate ko kanina, no, this is not what we call yung mga built-in blocks natin. So, this is what we call our built-in blocks. So, let's say under control, ito po yung mga yan, no? We won't be discussing isa-isa itong mga to, no? I'll be just providing you some examples of the blocks na meron tayo under the different categories of the built-in blocks na meron tayo, no? Okay. Yung mga blocks kanina na we've provided will be blocks that are default from the components that we've added dito sa inyong mobile application. Now, ang main difference lang po nito kapag sinabi natin built-in, no, it's regardless if meron kayong mga components na nilagay kanina or wala, these are available. Nandito sila, no? So let's say for example, if I'll be moving one of the components or design component dito sa kabila, no, matatanggal din yung mga blocks na nandito. Okay? So let's say for example, if we'll be deleting itong text to speech na to, delete natin 'yan. Okay? So makikita nyo ngayon dito sa blocks, mawawala yung mga nilagay ko kanina. Okay? So, kasi, ang nangyari po is we've deleted yung ating text-to-speech na component. But, let's say ito, burahin natin lahat itong mga to, no? Let's delete everything. Yan, even na ma-delete ko itong mga to, yung mga blocks natin for the built-in are still in here. So, kaya po sila tinatawag na built-in blocks. Okay? So, next. So, this is an overview of all the built-in blocks available for Blocks Editor. So, we have control blocks, logic blocks, math blocks, text blocks, list blocks, procedure blocks, variables block, colors, and dictionaries blocks. Okay, so medyo marami-rami yan. Again, no, hindi ko po i-discuss lahat yan, guys, kasi masyadong marami for this module natin, no. So, I'll be just providing you some examples, okay? Tapos later on, at the end of each block, let's say ito, control block, meron akong link na pinrovide dito, okay? You can just check yung mga additional na blocks na hindi natin madi-discuss for those categories. Okay? So, now let's proceed, no? So, next, after ng mga categories natin, no, ng mga blocks natin, no, let's proceed First is you have event handlers. So app inventor programs describe how the phone should respond to certain events. So let's say a button has been pressed, the phone is being shaken, the user is dragging her finger over a canvas, etc. So this is specified by event handler blocks, which use the word when. So for example, when button 1 is clicked, or when accelerometer sensor shaking, 1 is shaking. Okay? So ito yung mga example na ginawa natin mga blocks kanina, no? So, we call them event handlers. So, ibig sabihin, ano ba ngayon yung mga events? So, these are, let's say, sabihin na natin, activities that we as the user na pina-perform natin sa mobile application natin. Let's say, a click. Let's say, a button click. Pag click natin yung button, no? So, this is an example, yung mismong pag-click, okay, yung tawag natin dun is an event. Yung shaking is an event. Okay, itong event handlers na to are basically ano yung ipe-perform nung program or nung applications natin once na nagkaroon ng ganitong klaseng event. So, yun po yung ginagawa natin kanina. Let's say, yung button click, kapag kinlik natin, magpa-pop up yung camera, no? Okay. So, yung mga blocks na ginamit natin doon kanina are called event handlers. Okay. So, same as with accelerometer sensor 1 that's shaking. This is also an example of your event handler. So, most event handlers are green in color and are stored in the top of each drawer. So, here are some of the examples of the event handler. So, when an event occurs on the phone, the corresponding event handler is set fire, which means it's executed. So, let's say for example, ito, ayan, we have a sample of a, sabihin na natin na series of blocks dito. Okay? So, ngayon, yung event handler natin is button 1 click. So, kapag kinlik daw yung button 1, no? Okay? So, when button 1 is click, so this is basically, again, no? Tulad na sinabi ko kanina, this is your conditional statement. So, if this is satisfied, and sabihin na natin, naklik yung button natin, we have yung do dito sa event handler natin. So, ibig sabihin nun, eto ngayon yung mga activities, okay, na ipa-perform ng ating event handler. So, sabi niya dito, call sound1.play. Okay, i-call niya ngayon itong object na to, sound1, then i-play niya. After that, so ito yung first na i-execute niya, no? The second execute niya will be si sound1 that vibrate. Magbabibrate yan ngayon. Then, we'll be defining yung number of milliseconds dito. So, halimbawa, it will be providing 500 milliseconds for the duration of the vibration. Okay? So, yan ngayon yung tinatawag natin na event handlers. So, ito ngayon yung, ayan yung event ngayon, no? Anong ginagawa ng event handler ngayon? Pina-perform niya ngayon itong mga ina-execute na to. So, let's say ito kanina, or when accelerometer sensor 1 is shaking, do call sound play 1. So, ibig sabihin nito, kapag shinake natin, okay, ipa-play niya ngayon itong sound na to. This is something similar sa ginawa nating example kanina, no? Yung pag sinishake natin, kinukuha niya yung text from the text box and dinadaan niya kay text to speech para yung text na nilagay mo, it will be converting it to speech. Okay, we also have commands and expressions. So when an event handler fires, it executes a sequence of commands in its body. So a command is a block that specifies an action to be performed by the phone. So an example niyan is playing sounds. So most common blocks are in purple or blue in color. So here are some example of the commands in which you may recognize from building yung hello per. So some of you, doon sa mga assignment na ibinigay ko, no, ginawa itong hello per kasi this is an example of a basic tutorial. So yung hello per na yan, so ito yung mga examples ng mga tawag dito, commands na meron tayo. So let's say ito call, play sound 1, yung vibrate, and halimbawa, label, background color, papalitan mo yung background color ng label mo or you'll be just displaying text. Let's say ito, displaying text na CS117 rocks. Okay? So, some commands require one or more input values or ito yung madalas na tinatawag natin sa programming na parameters or arguments. So, to completely specify their action, for example, call sound 1 that vibrate needs to know the number of milliseconds to vibrate. Okay. Let's say set label 1 background color needs to know the new background color of the label. So, ngayon, kung babalikan natin itong mga to, no? So, these are the commands, okay? Then, ito ngayon yung mga arguments or parameters na kailangan natin isupply dito sa mga commands na to in order for them to perform. Kasi, let's say ito, kung hindi natin ilalagay yung background color, anong background color isa-set niya or ipapalit niya? Okay? So, something like that. Now, let's say for example, these sockets can be filled with expressions. So ano kaya itong mga expressions na to? Ito yung mga or mathematical expressions na we can basically perform computations, okay, using itong mga blocks na to. Later pupunta tayo dun sa mga math blocks natin. So expression blocks have leftward pointing plugs so that transmit the value to the socket. So larger expressions can be built out of simpler ones by horizontal composition. For example, all of the expressions denote the number 500. So let's say ito, you're just basically indicating a number. So itong mga susunod na to, no, will be ano 'yon, will be performing pa yung mga arithmetic expressions in order for us to have the value na 500. Okay? Ito mga numbers na to can be changed to variable depende sa inyo kung paano nyo gagawin yung inyong mga expressions. Next, commands are shaped so that they can naturally compose vertically into a command stack. Ito po yung example natin ng command stack. So, kanina, we have a series of commands na hindi magkakadikit, no? So, this is just an example of a command. Kapag pinagdikit-dikit natin yung mga yan, as you can see, parang itong mga notches na to, kapag pinagdikit-dikit natin sila, this is called a command stack. But in terms of execution, no, same lang din naman ang mangyayari dyan eh. Kung alin yung nasa taas, yun yung unang mag-execute. Okay? So, ano ngayon ang difference itong mga commands na to as compared to this command stack? In terms of execution, wala po. Kasi kung ano yung nasa taas, yun po yung una niyang execute. So, mas maganda lang tingnan ito kasi lahat ngayon ng mga commands na to, pwede nating ilagay sa isang event handler para yung trigger natin iisa lang. So, when this stack of commands is placed on the body of an event handler, ayan, tulad ng sinabi natin, the command will be executed from top to bottom. If the stack of the commands above is executed, then the phone will first play the sound, then vibrate, then change the label's color to be green, and then label will show the text CS117 rocks. So, however, the execution happens very quickly. So, you will see all the action happen essentially at the same time. So, katulad ng sinabi natin, no, the execution of this command stack as compared to this series of blocks will be almost the same. Kasi yung execution natin, mabilis lang naman. Ang logic lang naman dito is kung ano yung pinakauna na command natin or expression natin sa taas, yun yung unang mag-execute pababa. Okay, now, let's proceed dun sa first or sa isang example natin ng mga built-in blocks, no? We have control blocks. So, eto ngayon are basically the conditional statements that we can use in MIT App Inventor. So, eto, as you can see, we have if then else, and if then else, if else, then else. So, katulad lang po ito nung concept na ginagamit natin doon sa programming natin na if else if, and if else, or if else, and else if. These have, or these three will have the same functionality, no? Yun nga lang po, this is yung tinatawag natin na ano, na visual programming. So instead of typing all the codes, no, we already have the mga blocks available for us. Let's say ito, kiklik lang natin yung control. Then we can already drag itong mga to and provide the conditions na gusto natin gamitin sa mga to. Okay, we can also use yung ating mutator, okay? So let's say gusto mo maglagay ng else dito sa baba, ayan, you may do so. Gusto mo ng else if, ayan, you can insert it, you may do so. Ang tawag natin dito sa gear na to is yung mutator natin. So pwede natin palitan or pwede natin ma-modify yung blocks natin na to. Okay? So, ayan. So, how to use the mutator daw. So, yung dinemo ko kanina, it will be providing you the same example on this GIF. So, aside from those conditional statements, no, we also have yung for each from 2. So, ito naman ngayon, runs the block in the do section for each numeric value in the range starting from and ending 2. So, incrementing the number by the value by each time, use given variable number to refer the current value. You can change the name of the number to something else you wish. So, eto ngayon, parang basically this is creating a tawag dito, for loop. Okay? So, this is a counterpart of yung for loop na ginagawa natin on your usual Java programming or your Python programming, no? So, you'll be defining ngayon kung ano yung mga parameters ng for loop mo and kung ano ngayon i-execute niya under the do. Next, we have your while and do with result, no? So, ang counterpart naman nito, yun nga, sa ginagawa natin, this is your while statement and your do while statement. Okay? So, they will have the same logic. So, ito, while the test is true, no, it will be executing kung ano man yung laman ng do. So, dito naman sa kabila, it will perform muna kung ano yung nandun sa do before changing or, ayan, providing the result. Next, we have open another screen. So, ito naman, ang ginagawa nito is opens the screen with the provided name. So, the screen name must be one of the screens created using the designer. So, um, the screen name should be selected from the connected screen name drop down block. So, if you do open another screen, you should close it when returning to the main screen for for free system memory. So, failure to open such screen upon leaving it eventually lead to memory problems. So, kapag sinabi po natin memory problems, no, this is the amount of RAM na kinakain ng mobile application nyo dun sa mobile phone nyo. So, app developer should never close screen 1 or use this block to open or to return to screen 1. Use the close screen block instead. So, ito guys, will be providing an example dun sa ating next module kasi next module natin will be creating yung tinatawag natin applications with multiple screens. So basically, ang ginagawa lang nito is it will be opening a screen or ibig sabihin it will be creating a new page ng inyong mobile application. Let's say kapag kinlik mo tong submit, saan ka mapupunta, di ba? You'll be directed to a new page or to a new screen. So ito yung gagamitin natin na block to do that. Then we also have this one, open another screen with a start value. So, opens another screen and passes a value to it. So, let's say for example, sabihin na natin after nung login. So, kapag kinlik mo yung login, anong mangyayari? Ibabato niya ngayon yung start value or magbabato siya ng value. So, ito yung gagamitin mo niyan ngayon. So, yung value na yon, pwede mong i-retrieve yun, then ipasa ngayon papunta dun sa iyong database. Okay? We also have get plain text start. So returns the plain text that was passed to the screen when it was started by another app. So if no value was passed, it returns the empty text field. So for multiple screen apps, use get start value rather than get plain start text. Okay, so yung kanina, you're passing down a value. Dito naman, you're passing down text, no? So, ayan siya. So, for more examples of the control block, pakiclick na lang po itong link na to. I'll be providing you naman the PowerPoint for this module. Again, no, we won't be covering every blocks kasi marami-rami po sila. Next, we have logic blocks. So, pagdating dito sa logic blocks na to, no, these are the blocks na ginagamit natin for creating yung inyong mga logical statements. So, let's say for example, itong true, false, not, equal, and not equal, and or dito po natin sila makita. So, kung paano po natin ginagamit ngayon yung ating true, false, not on the usual programming natin, it will have the same concept. So, let's say itong dalawa na to, itong true, false na to, this represents yung parang boolean value natin. So, whether if the value of our, sabihin na natin na variable is true or false. Then we have not, it performs a logical negation returning false if the input is true. So kung halimbawa, ididikit natin ngayon itong not tapos itong true na to, it will be providing as a false. Okay, kung ano yung kabaliktaran nung ano man yung inattach natin dito, whether it's true or false. So, ito, it is used to measure yung equality ng itong mga blocks or yung mga conditions na ilalagay natin dito, no? So, let's say for example, you'll be checking equality ng 1 tsaka 1. Ayan, it will be providing as answer na true. Okay? Then, we have yung not equal. Okay. Then, we also have ito, we have and or. So, dito ngayon sa loob, we could provide, okay, yung ating mga conditional statements. Let's say, for example, we'll be creating yung equal na to. Ayan, pwede natin ipasok yan dito sa loob. So, ngayon, meron din tayong mutator dito. I'll just show you kung ano yung mga iba natin pwede magawa on your mutator, no? So, let's say logic. Ito, halimbawa, itong end na to. Pwede mong i-select yung mutator na to. Halimbawa, ayan, you have multiple values, no? Or you can also select itong drop-down selection na to para palitan kung alin yung gusto mong gamitin. Halimbawa, Yan. Okay? So, let's say for example, let's check an equality. So, let's say for example, uh, gamit tayo ng math. Let's say ito is 0 is equal to 0. Tapos ngayon ito, pwede nyong ipasok yan dito sa loob. So, check nga natin kung may lalagay natin. Ayan siya. So, ganyan po natin kinocombine yung mga blocks natin. If there is a certain scenario na kakailanganin yung checking ng mga operators na to, no? Ganyan po natin sila nilalagay. So, let's say for example, tingnan natin, halimbawa, ilalagay natin false or true and true. You can simply attach that. Okay. Ayan siya. Pwede natin mapag-combine yan. Tapos, yung nasa kabila, another set of, ano na naman yan? Another set of conditional statement na naman yan. So, let's say we're using not equal. Halimbawa, ilalagay natin this is true and this is true. Ayan siya ngayon. Ganyan natin ginagawa. Okay? So, this is an example nung expression natin to check yung end operator natin. Then, ayan no, we're also familiar with OR naman eh. So, to have additional logic blocks, ayan, again, tulad ng sinabi ko, just click this one guys, makikita nyo yung mismong documentation ni MIT App Inventor. Okay. Or wala na pala siya, naubos na natin yung mga logic blocks natin. Okay, so now let's proceed. Then we have your math blocks. Ito mga math blocks na to, ito yung madalas na ginagamit natin for creating our arithmetic expressions. So let's say for example, ito, so equality, not equality, less than sign, greater than sign, no? So this is similar dun sa ginawa natin kanina. So let's say for example, under math, ayan siya. We can use this to, let's say, check whether the value nung dalawang number natin, sabihin na natin, will be providing two numbers, no? Okay, so let's say, drag natin ito. So, let's say, we'll be using 5 dito sa first value and dito sa value na to. If we'll be creating, sabihin na natin na logic na A5 is less than ganito, no? We could create a simple statement na pwede nating execute dito. Okay? So, limbawa, meron kayong sabihin na natin na text you want to display na true or false, then you can do so dito. Ayan siya. So, this will be an example of your math blocks, no? So, we also have yung minimum and maximum natin. So, ang ginagawa naman ng minimum and maximum nato, no? So, it measures yung minimum and maximum value within a range. Kung halimbawa, we provided a list of numbers, ayan yung pwede natin gamitin. So, ito, we also have this one, square root, yung ABS, yung log, yung to the nth power, or anong tawag, round, ceiling, floor, etc., etc. These are the different functions that we can perform dito kay MIT App Inventor. So, instead of coding down or typing down yung source code natin for creating the expressions for this computation, no, pwedeng i-drop down na lang natin yung mga yan. Next, we also have your basic number block. So, ito po yung ginamit ko kanina in order for us to provide yung number do sa ating mga conditional statement. Okay? So, ayan siya. Next, we have yung radix number block. So, this represents yung base 10 number. By clicking the 0, will allow you to change yung numerical value. Tapos, dito, no, you can change yung ano, nakalimutan ko na yung tawag dito. So, ito, different number base. So, ayan, whether it's hexadecimal, decimal. Okay, so kapag halimbawa, it is not defined, okay, so you can simply assume na ito is a decimal value. Okay, so pwedeng octal, nasa sa inyo naman yan, if what type of number base yung gusto nyo gamitin. Then, ito, this is basically yung simple addition natin, no? So, you can also use the mutator, ayan, to define how many numbers yung gusto nyo ilagay. Let's say, if you want to add 3 numbers, you just drag down itong number na to dito sa additional arguments nyo in order for you to add additional numbers. Okay? Now, you can also use the mutator ayan, again, no, to have additional numbers. Next, we have random integer. So, returns a random integer value between the given values. So, in order the order of the arguments doesn't matter. So let's say for example, you want a random integer from 5 to 10. So it will be providing you a number. So halimbawa, gusto mong mag-loop yan ng ganitong number ng times, pwede mong gamitin yan dito. Random function returns a random value between 0 to 1. Okay, so fraction naman itong nandito sa kabila. Then we also have yung minimum and maximum. So you'll be providing a set of numbers. Let's say sabihin na natin you'll be using list view. Okay, it will be providing you ngayon kung ano yung pinakamaliit na number na pwede mong gamitin or minimum value na meron dun sa list mo na yon. Yung kabaliktaran naman sa max, it will be providing you the largest number within a series or set of numbers. You can also use itong mutator na to define whether you want to use minimum or maximum. Ayan. For additional math blocks, click nyo lang itong link na to, guys. Then, we also have your text blocks. So, let's say ito, you want to provide a text, no? So, you'll be using itong string block na to. So, dito sa loob, you can provide a text, no? Let's say, for example, ito, drag mo to ngayon, no? You can basically add text dito sa loob na to. Halimbawa, you want to display text na hello world. Ayan siya. Ita-type mo yan dito ngayon sa loob. Okay, so kung halimbawa, meron kang text box, you can use this in conjunction with your text box to display kung ano man itong text na ilalagay mo dito. Okay, so I believe ginamit na natin ito kanina dun sa text-to-speech natin wherein kung ano man yung tinype natin from the text box, no, convert niya to text-to-speech. Next, we have join. So, it appends all the inputs to make a single string. If no inputs, it returns an empty string. So, kapag sinabi natin appends, pinagdudugtong niya po yung mga text na nilalagay nyo. Halimbawa, dito sa taas, yung pinrovide natin na string is hello, tapos yung nasa baba is world. Pagdudugtungin niya yon, yung hello world without a space in between. Then length. So, this is a function ngayon that returns the number of characters including spaces in a string. So, this is the length of the given string. So, next one is empty. Returns whether or not the string contains any characters, including spaces. When string length is 0, return true. Otherwise, return false. So, basically, this is an example of a block na could be helpful, particularly sa creating a registration form. So, halimbawa, meron kang text box, no? You want to check if na-fill in niya ba lahat ng mga text boxes mo. Okay, you can use this one. So, let's say, for example, meron kang nakita or meron siyang na-detect na it's empty, kailangan, it won't be proceeding dun sa kanyang registration. Okay? Kailangan kompleto. So, you can use this function to do that. Kumbaga, it's like a filtering mechanism whether lahat ba ng fields ng registration mo is merong laman or wala. Next, text comparison. So, returns whether or not the first string is lexicographically. Okay? So, the second string depending on which the dropdown is selected. Let's say, for example, if we want to check yung equality ng dalawang text natin, no? Let's say, yung dalawang cats, whether yung dalawang text natin is equivalent ba sila or hindi. Then, we also have the trim function. So, removes any spaces leading or trailing the input string and returns the result. Okay, so it removes all these spaces or trailing inputs na meron dun sa string natin, or basically it removes yung ating mga white spaces. Okay, contains, no, this is a block or a function that returns true if a piece of text appears, otherwise it returns false. So, contains any. So, return true if any of the pieces in the piece list appears in text. Otherwise, it returns false. So, by changing this block can be obtained by changing the drop down on the contains block. So, let's say, and this one. You can select this one. So, for additional text box, here's the link. So, you can simply click this one, guys, no? Ayan, medyo marami-rami po sila, no? So, again, hindi ko na sila i-cover lahat. Okay, next. Next, we have list blocks. So, the first one is create an empty list. So, creates an empty list with no elements. So, we'll be creating a list dito. Let's say a list of number, list of names, etc., etc. Make a list. So, create a list given blocks. So, if you don't supply any arguments, this creates an empty list which you can add elements to do later. So, this block is a mutator. So, clicking the blue plus sign will allow you to add additional items on your list. So, let's say you want to create a list of city, you want to create a list of countries, you may do so dito. Okay, so ayan, this is your list. So add items to list. So adds the given items to the end of the list. The difference between this and the append to list is that append to list takes the items to be appended on a single list, while add items to the list takes the number as individual arguments. So this block is also a mutator. Then we also have a function no dito, which is the length of list returns the number of items on the list. So, it will be counting how many items, how many words, or how many numbers are there dun sa list nyo. Pick a random number. So, picks an item at random from the list. So, if you have 3 items dun sa list nyo, no, it will be selecting one number randomly within your list. Then, we have index in list. Returns the position of the thing in the list. If not it's the list, then it returns 0. So, it will be counting down pang ilan yung index na to. Let's say you want to index itong certain word na to, kung pang ilan siya, then you'll be using this function. Select list item. So, select the item at given index in the given list. So, the first list item is at index number 1. So, for additional list blocks, ito po yung link natin. Next, we have colors blocks. So, in colors blocks, no, there are 3 main types of color blocks. So, a color box, a make color, and a split color. So, how do colors work in App Inventor? So, internally, App Inventor stores each color as a single number. So, when you use make color and take it to the list of arguments, internally, this list is then converted into App's Inventor color scheme and stored as a number. So, if you knew the numbers for the colors, you could even specify what color you wanted something to be just by setting the color property to a specific number. So, ang ginagamit natin dito, I believe, is RGB. Okay? So, let's say for example, ito yung first type ng colors natin. It's a basic color. So, this is a basic color block. It has a small square shape and has a color in the middle that represents the color stored internally within this block. If you click the color in the middle, a pop-up appears on the screen with a table of 70 colors that you can choose. Okay, so let's say for example, saan na ba yun? Let's try to add a color, no? So, halimbawa, this is the red. If you want to change, pwede mo i-click ito, then a color picker will appear. Pwede mong palitan ngayon yung kulay na yan. Okay? Next is, each basic block can drag, that you drag with the color drawer to the blocks editor will display a table with the same colors when clicked. Next, we have your make color. So, make color takes in a list of 3 or 4 numbers. So, these numbers, this list represents values in RGB code. So, if you're using 3 numbers, no, the color mode na gagamitin niya is RGB. If 4 numbers ang ilalagay natin, ang color mode na gagamitin niya is yung ARGB. So, A is alpha. So, ito ngayon yung gagamitin nyo na value if gano'n ka-transparent nyo gusto yung kulay. Okay? So, RGB codes are used to make colors on the internet. So, an RGB color mode chart is available here. So, this first number in the list represents R. So, halimbawa, this one. If you'll be looking at this RGB code, no, you can simply say na itong kulay na to is color red. Why? So, 255 is the maximum value na pwedeng i-hold dito sa RGB. So, naka-max out yung value natin for red, then naka-0 yung for green and blue. So, ibig sabihin, ang active na color lang natin is red. So, basically, using these numerical values, we could represent color. Okay, using RGB values. Next, we have a split color. Split color does the opposite of the make color. It takes in the color, let's say a color block, variable holding a color or property from one of the components representing a color and returns a list of RGB values in that color's RGB code. Okay? Now, let's proceed with the variable blocks. there are 5 main types of variable blocks. So, initialize global name. Let's say creating a global variable. Get, okay? So, to get the value, set the value is like um, providing a numerical value, let's say a variable declaration, okay? Then we also have initialize local name to in, then do, or initialize local name into return. Next, initialize global name. So this block is used to create a global variable. So it takes in any type of value as an argument. So clicking on name will change the name of the variable of this global variable. So the global variables are used in all procedures or events so that this block will stand alone. So global variables can be changed while an app is running and can be referred to and changed from any part of the app, even within the procedure and event handlers. You may rename this block at any time, and any associated blocks referring to the old name will be automatically updated. No? So basically, it's creating a global variable that could be accessed in the totality of your mobile application. Kaya siya tinatawag na global, no? All the procedures and all the event handlers maybe are able to access kung ano man yung value nitong variable na to. Next, so get. This block provides a way to get variables you may have created. Okay? Then set. This block follows the same rules as get. Only variables in the scope will be available in the dropdown. So once a variable V is selected, you can attach a block to give V a new value. Next. So a procedure is a sequence of blocks or code that is stored under a name. So the name of the procedure block, instead of having to keep putting everything together, the same long sequence of blocks, you can create a procedure and just call the procedure block whatever you want your sequence of blocks to run. So in computer science, a procedure might also be called a function or a method. So let's say for example in here, no, create tayo ng simpleng procedure natin. Let's say eto, um, ano ba? Listen muna natin ito. Okay, so let's say for example, you want to add a series of, sabihin na natin na function, no? Let's try to create a simple logic. Let's say something like this. While test, lagay tayo ng simpleng logic. While 0 is equal to 0. Ayan, drag lang natin dito. Something to do. Ano bang pwede natin gawin? Ito, let's say set orientation, no? I'll be just dragging some, some blocks dito. It's regardless of the logic. I'll be just adding them just to create a simple, sabihin na natin, example of a, tawag dito, simple example of a procedure. Okay, so itong procedure na to, let's say palitan natin compute. Ngayon, ito, you can basically just call itong compute na to. So instead of doing this block or creating this block multiple times, no, you can simply just call yung kinreate mo ngayon. So halimbawa, if for example, meron ka ulit if else statement, no, you can just simply drag it papunta dito sa loob. So kung halimbawa, naglagay ka ng simpleng condition na something like this, okay. So instead na gagawin mo yan, no, we can just simply call yung function or yung procedure na ginawa mo. Again, no, katulad ng sinabi dito, this is like a function or a method. So magde-define tayo ng function or magde-define tayo ng method, then pwede na natin siyang i-call anytime na gusto natin. Okay? So the procedure do collects a sequence of blocks together into a group. You can then use the sequence of blocks repeatedly by calling the procedure. So yung pinakita natin kanina. If the procedure has arguments, you may specify the arguments by using the blocks mutator button. If you click the blue plus sign, you can drag additional arguments into the procedure. So, eto, again, no, once you've created the procedure, a new procedure block will appear. So, make sure na if you're creating your procedures na you should choose a unique name. Okay? So click on the name and type to change it. Procedure names in app must be unique. App Inventor will not let you define two procedures on the same screen with the same name. You can rename a procedure at any time while you are building the app by changing its label in the block, the original block, no? The App Inventor will automatically rename the associated call blocks to match. So, when you create a procedure, App Inventor automatically generates a block and places it on the procedures drawer katulad nung ginawa ko kanina. So, automatically nandun na siya. Next, procedure result. So, same as the procedure do block, but calling this one procedure returns a result. So, it will be providing you a return value. Ito lang yung pinagkaiba nung sa kanina. Let's say yung kanina, no, yung pinakita natin, it will be just executing this one. Dito, in procedure result, this is more concerned with, let's say, processing or processing an information or processing a data that will be returned upon a function call. Okay? So, that will be the end of our discussion, guys, for module 4, no? Again, I can't cover lahat ng mga components na meron tayo and or blocks na meron tayo for MIT App Inventor. So, I provided you for this module some of the examples ng mga components and blocks na pwede natin gamitin for creating your mobile applications. Now, for the next module na gagawin natin, next one or next two modules natin, ang discussion will be more on the what are the additional topics na meron tayo for App Inventor, let's say multiple screens, yung responsive design, no? Yung mga discussions natin doon will be focus more on demonstration na. Okay? So, dun sa demonstration na yon, lahat ng mga binanggit natin ng mga blocks or most of the components na ginamit natin kanina, diniscuss natin kanina, and some of the blocks that were discussed earlier, magagamit po natin yung mga yon. So, basically, the idea of this module is to introduce you what are the different components and what are the different types of blocks that we can use in MIT App Inventor in order for you to create your mobile application. Whether your mobile application is a simple application that can do registration and logging in, or let's say complex mobile application that will be able to, let's say, monitor, determine certain parameters using yung mga sensors natin. Let's say, yung sabihin na natin yung light sensor, yung proximity sensor. Let's say, creating an IoT, a complex IoT application. Okay, we can do that in MIT App Inventor. So for this module, we've just introduced sa inyo kung ano yung mga blocks, ano yung mga components that you can use to create simple application or to create complex applications. Okay? So that will be it for our module 4. If you have additional questions, guys, just send me a private message. Thank you.